Welcome to The Explainer, where we break down complex topics using the source material itself. Today, we're diving into a story that honestly feels like it's straight out of a sci-fi thriller, but it uncovers a pretty deep and unsettling truth about the very architecture of our reality.
So, let's jump right in. Imagine this. It's March 2026. A world leader is alive and well, but the world just doesn't believe it. The more proof he offers, the more he tries to show everyone he's real, the less people believe him. This isn't fiction. It's actually the perfect case study for how our shared sense of reality is starting to, well, dissolve.
Our story kicks off in March of 2026, right in the middle of a military conflict. Suddenly, rumors start spreading like wildfire online that the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, has been killed in an attack. But this wasn't just any ordinary rumor. Not even close.
You see, this wasn't just a simple lie. It was a really sophisticated, multi-stage campaign. First, you get these AI-generated images of a deceased Netanyahu flooding social media. So, on March 12th, he holds a live press conference, to prove he's alive. But instead of killing the rumors, people start zooming in on the video, claiming they see 6 fingers. That classic AI art mistake. Okay, so 3 days later, he tries again. He posts a super casual video from a cafe, literally counting his 5 fingers for the camera. And what happens? The conspiracy just gets stronger. The video gets torn apart, pixel by pixel, by this global army of online sleuths.
And this brings us right to the absolute core of the problem. It brings us to a really terrifying question for our time. What happens when the very nature of proof just collapses? When seeing with your own 2 eyes is no longer believing?
Now check this out, because what's so wild is that every single piece of evidence for this deepfake had a perfectly logical, technical explanation. That whole 6 fingers thing? It was just a motion blur artifact from his hand gesture mixed with heavy video compression. The coffee that didn't look like it was moving right? An optical illusion. A ring on his finger that seemed to vanish for a split second? That's a super common glitch from the aggressive compression that social media platforms use. But here's the crucial part. The forensic reality didn't matter one bit.
It seems the public had learned just enough about AI to be dangerous. The source material calls this partial AI literacy, and it created this kind of hyper-skepticism. People felt empowered, They thought they knew how to spot a deepfake. But what was really happening was they were misinterpreting completely normal video glitches and artifacts as the absolute smoking gun of a massive government conspiracy.
And then, to make matters worse, the very tools we turned to for clarity basically poured gasoline on the fire. It's something called the LLM disinformation loop. Here's how it works. First, the disinformation floods social media. Second, tons of users go to their AI chatbots like Grok and ask, hey, is this video authentic? Third, the AI, which is trained on the internet, scans all that online chatter, which is, you guessed it, filled with the conspiracy theories. And finally, the AI confidently labels the real video a probable deepfake, giving the whole conspiracy the stamp of technological authority. The machine was basically just confirming our own paranoia right back at us.
This whole phenomenon actually has a name, and it was theorized way back in 2018. It's called the liar's dividend, and it's like a two-way street of mistrust. On one hand, it lets guilty people dismiss real hard evidence as just a sophisticated deepfake. But on the other hand, and this is maybe even more insidious, it makes all of us so doubtful that we start to question things that are actually authentic. It's like a universal acid that just dissolves trust itself.
So, this breakdown of trust isn't just some unfortunate accident. The source material we're looking at argues that it's actually a feature of a whole new architecture of power, a new form of control it calls hypnocracy. Now forget everything you know about old-school totalitarian regimes that controlled people with force. Hypnocracy is different. It doesn't need to lock people up or censor books. It operates directly on our state of consciousness, sort of gently guiding us into what the author calls a permanent, functional, algorithmic trance through the social media feeds and platforms we use every single day. And here's where the whole thing gets brilliantly meta. The very book that defined hypnocracy was itself a masterful act of the same reality manipulation it described. So in 2025, this book becomes a global bestseller, credited to this mysterious Chinese philosopher, Jianwei Xun. The media and academics are praising him, and then an investigation reveals the truth. Jianwei Xun never existed. He was a fiction, created by an Italian author working with AI. The whole thing was a performance, designed to prove its own point by tricking the world's intellectual elite.
So what's the ultimate result of this hypnocratic system, this constant algorithmic trance we're all in?
Well, the author describes the end state as gaseous reality.
I mean, just think about that metaphor. Reality isn't solid or liquid anymore. It doesn't have clear boundaries. It's a gas. In a gaseous reality, truth and fiction, they're not even opposites. They're just floating around together in the same digital container, able to take the shape of whatever narrative happens to have the most viral momentum at any given moment.
So if the goal isn't to convince you of a specific lie anymore, like in the old days of propaganda, then what is the new objective? What's the point of it all?
The goal is simply to exhaust you, to flood the zone with so many conflicting stories, deepfakes, and half-truths that your brain just gets tired. Your cognitive and emotional resources are completely depleted. For the propagandist, victory is that moment when the public just throws its hands up and says, you know what? It's impossible to know what's real anymore. That surrender, that's the whole point.
Okay, now let's switch gears for a second and look at a totally different domain, the literal battlefield. Because the source material draws this absolutely shocking parallel. We're about to see how the very same logic that's dissolving our reality is also transforming physical warfare.
So during that same 2026 conflict in Iran, military AI was enabling something called decision compression. Basically, AI could find, validate, and direct attacks at a speed that was literally inhuman. The number of strikes they carried out in just 12 hours would have taken weeks of human planning in the past. So what gets compressed? What gets squeezed out of that equation? Human deliberation? Ethical judgment? Legal oversight? All the slow stuff?
And this right here, this is probably the single most important takeaway from this whole explainer. You have the exact same root cause, algorithmic speed just outpacing human thought, and it's having these parallel devastating effects in two totally separate areas. In the cognitive domain, the viral speed of disinformation makes slow, careful fact-checking totally irrelevant. On the battlefield, the algorithmic speed of targeting turns slow, careful human oversight into a meaningless rubber stamp. The result? The collapse of shared truth on one side and the collapse of applied ethics on the other.
So what can we do about all this? The source material doesn't really offer any easy fixes or simple solutions. Instead, it suggests we need a fundamental shift in our mindset.
The argument is that you can't just log off. There is no outside of this system to escape to anymore. The only way forward is to try and achieve what the author calls conscious trance. It's kind of like the idea of lucid dreaming. You learn to become aware that you're inside the dream. The goal is to learn how to navigate the constant hypnosis of our digital world while fiercely protecting a core of your own autonomous, independent perception.
And we'll end with this really powerful thought from the author Daniel Quinn, which kind of puts the challenge right back on us. He writes that the dominant story of our culture is like this constant noise. You don't have to try to hear it. You have to make a conscious effort not to hear it. So the final question for all of us, I guess, is, are we making that effort?